Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for being here today. Today's video is going to be my April wrap-up. I read a number of really fantastic books and then a few disappointments, which that's just how it goes sometimes. Not every book can be a winner. However, the disappointments were mainly in the romance category, which was surprising because of how much I love romance these days. So I'm gonna spend this next month kind of taking a pause, taking a step back, not really reading romance, just to give my brain a little break. Because I think, honestly, like 70% of the books I read over the last year were romances. So I think I just, my brain is asking me to read some historical fiction, some just more general fiction, and memoirs. Those are the categories I've really been drawn to lately. But before we get into the books, I have two announcements. Number one, we've just got some questions, which is, what was your favorite book this month? What was your biggest disappointment this month? And how are you feeling about reading in general in April? I've been having a lot of fun asking this question every month because I feel like in January, we're all like, new year, new me, I want to read a bunch. And then February, we're like, oh, it's a short month, I didn't read as much. And then March and April is a toss-up. Like March, I felt really fatigued. And then in April, I felt a little rejuvenated. So just let me know. How has reading been for you? How are you feeling? And all the things. So those are the questions. And then the second announcement is that Ana Luisa, my beautiful jewelry friends who I've co-created two pieces with, are having a big Mother's Day sale. So regardless on if you're buying a gift for yourself, a mother in your life, or just someone that you love, they're having this really cool sale, which is buy one, get one 40% off. So I have a necklace with them, which is like this hand with a jewel on the finger, and then these earrings that we came out with in March, which are these like really cool little pearl dangle earrings that were inspired by women in Greek retellings that I was reading, but they also feel very bridal because there's like a little bit piece of blue sea glass, so it feels a little bit like something blue. And I'm just really, really excited with how they turned out. So I'm gonna leave a link to my earrings and my necklace down below if you'd like to take advantage of the sale, but everything on there is on sale: rings, bracelets, necklaces, earrings, and I love them. Anyway, that's the sale. So let's get into the books, my friends. Again, I'm gonna save the romances for the end of this video. So we're just gonna jump into some general fiction that I read this month. The first one is Memphis, which was a book that was actually recommended to me in my March wrap-up. Someone said, hey Noelle, there's this new book that just came out called Memphis, and there's these really cool descriptions of hands in it. I think you'd really like it. Because everyone knows how much I love hand imagery and hand paintings and hand photos, and I love hands, especially in literature. And so that immediately caught my eye. And then I looked it up and I said, cover, stunning, I'm reading it. So I didn't really know much about it. I just was fully taking on that recommendation, and it was one of the best books I read this month. I had such an incredible time with reading it. It does one of my favorite things with books, which is kind of this generational unfolding of a story and how there's one family at the epicenter and yet you get multiple perspectives on that same family. So you basically have a grandmother, her two daughters, and then a granddaughter's perspective. So it's like a four layered family story, and you just see each part of this family through various different stages of life and experiences and heartache and triumph and loss, and it's all kind of centralized in Memphis, and I loved it. I think it's genuinely going to be on like my top books of 2022 because of how expertly done the characters were crafted and just how much I empathize with each character. I will say, just as one content warning, there is a bit of sexual violence that is described. It's a very important plot point to the way that it ripples out in the family, but there is a description of it, so I just wanted to make sure that I said that up front so that when you're reading it, it doesn't come as a surprise. But the book itself was just super well crafted, and I really, really loved it. And thank you so much to the person that recommended this book to me. The hand descriptions were out of this world, and the book was just wonderful. So there's that. Okay, the next book is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a high fantasy novel that I read for my book club, which, by the way, my book club is not an exclusive book club. Anyone can join it. All you have to do is follow our Instagram and follow us on Discord if you want, because that's where we announce our live shows. But it's not you don't have to sign up for it. It's not you don't have to pay any money. It's just an open book club where we have a live show every month. So The Fifth Season was our March book pick, but we read it and discussed it in April. This book was so intimidating to me because it is a high fantasy, and that's a genre I don't read. And it's also a thick bitch. It is a big book and it's a high fantasy. So I was immediately overwhelmed, and I felt especially in the first half, I felt lost. And I think part of the reason for that is because with every genre, you kind of have to build up a stamina for it, at least in my opinion, right? I don't think that I can just jump into a classic if I haven't read one in 5 years. I kind of have to let myself ease into it and realize that it's a different type of story, a different type of character development. And so with the first half of The Fifth Season, I was I'm so confused. I don't really like this just because I'm so confused. I feel really lost. I feel like I am never gonna grasp what's going on here because it's a genre I don't really read. And yet, by the second half, I was hooked. By the second half, I felt like the adventure really started to pick up. I really started to understand the political dynamics and the overall tragedy that was happening within this world. And the ending, especially the last fourth, is just like a snowball of adventure. So although this isn't really my genre, and the first half did take a while for me to get into, by the second half, I was oh my God, number one, I understand why people love this genre so much. And then number two, fantasy writers are brilliant craftspeople. They are amazing at building and creating, because it's such a complicated genre, in my opinion, of just you have to make a whole new set of rules, a whole new set of politics, a whole new world and universe. And I don't know, I was just, when I was reading it, I was I don't know how anyone could think of this or keep track of it. So by the end of it, I was really into it. It's basically about a world where the climate and environment is so unstable that there's a group of people that are able to manipulate the world's power, the world's energy, and harness it and cause destruction and cause change. And so if one of these people causes destruction, and basically causes a huge earthquake, that's how they use their power a lot of the time, it creates a fifth season, which is just a massive, horribly destructive time in the world's history. And these fifth seasons can last months, years, decades, centuries. And so at the beginning of this book, a fifth season is started, and then you're watching as it unravels. You get the timeline before it happens, while it's happening, after it's happening. And so it's just really adventurous. Overall, I think N.K. Jemisin is a genius. Now let's pivot to my memoir of the month. And actually, let me put down my tea so that I can show you my May memoirs. So I talked about this in March, but I want to read a memoir a month. So I read Crying in H Mart in March, and I read Somebody's Daughter in April, and then in May, I'll talk about this book in a second, but in May, I want to read The Woman Warrior and Just Kids. These are two memoirs that I want to read in May. So if you want to join me in reading these, we can read them all together and then talk about them in my May wrap-up. But these are the memoirs I've selected for May, and we'll talk about these next month. But for this month, I read Somebody's Daughter, which was, how many times can I say it? I love memoirs these days, so I had such a blast reading it. And Somebody's Daughter felt like a more traditional memoir of here's childhood, here's teenage years, here's adulthood, here's now, like kind of like a linear look at a lifetime. But there were kind of three central pillars that the author kept going to. So for example, the author goes through something very traumatic as a young girl, like I think preteen, early teenage years, which has to do with, again, some sexual violence, which was really hard to read, but that is a pillar of the story that she goes back to describe her pain and her grief and her, I think, rejection of the self and her inability to love and accept herself. And then you have another pillar, which is her broken relationship with her father because her father is in prison. And so you see as she balances this confusion on how to love someone she's not around, how to try to connect or reconcile not having him around, but then also coming to terms with the crime that got him in prison and trying to figure out, like, how do you love someone once you've known what they've done? How do you love someone when you don't know them? But how could you stop either of those things when they are your father and you credit who you are to them? So that was a really interesting pillar for her to explore. And then the final pillar was just her really complicated relationship with her mom and all of the ups and downs that they've faced in her life. And then I think that this book also had some really, really moving and incredible depictions of true vulnerability and honesty. Because I think with writing a memoir, there's probably plenty of things that you'd want to just keep close to the chest and be like, I mean, I'll talk about myself, but I don't really want to talk about this part of my family or this thing that happened when I was a kid. There's like things that you just want to keep to yourself. And yet I feel like Ashley C. Ford laid it all out for everyone, which made the connection from reader to author very authentic and very strong, in my opinion. So I really enjoyed this one, and it was cool to get a more traditional memoir that did like the childhood to adulthood exploration. So that's Somebody's Daughter, and then again, these will be the two that I read next month. So please join me for that. All right, the next book that I read this month, well, actually, I started reading it in March, but I didn't finish it until this month, but that is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5. This is a book that, when I mentioned I was going to read it, so many of you said how much you loved the book, that it was one of your favorite books you had to read for high school, and that you just thought it was fantastic. And I was really nervous, just because when you see so many people loving a book, you're like, what if I don't? This will be hard if I don't, especially since I just know that Slaughterhouse 5 in general is very beloved. The other thing that made me nervous was that I knew that there was a bit of sci-fi, but I didn't realize the level of sci-fi. And so when you're getting this kind of anti-war conversation, and then all of a sudden there's a spaceship and some aliens, I was like, what is happening here? I don't understand, and I don't think I like it. So at first I was like, this is a little too out of left field. I don't get it. But by the end, I think it wraps up so well. I mean, once I gave it, the full chance of finishing it all the way through, I was like, oh, I see. This was really, really creative in the way that the author was processing his own time in the war. And this book was the product of what he wanted to say after he had gone through the war, as well as just doing this delicate balance of anti-war PTSD trauma and, was that a redundant PTSD trauma? I think that's redundant, but PTSD and sci-fi all balanced, and the sci-fi components felt like a way to explain and cope with Billy Pilgrim's PTSD. Was really, really fascinating. What I will say about this book is I would love, if anyone knows if there's any podcast episodes about this book specifically, like just podcast or YouTube videos that just talk about this book, I would love to watch or listen to them, because I feel like, because I didn't read this in high school, I'm missing a whole component of conversation. There are some books that you can kind of privately take in and love and digest yourself. And then there's other books like this one where I feel like I would really benefit from further conversation. So if you have an article or a podcast episode or a YouTube video, please let me know. That's Slaughterhouse 5. Okay, and then the last general fiction I read this month, I'll save the romances for after this one, but the last fiction I read was The Paris Bookseller, and this book saved my reading this month and just how I'm feeling about reading. So let me tell you what the book was about, and then I'll explain kind of how I've been feeling about my relationship with reading lately, and how this book helped me with it. But basically, this is a historical fiction that talks about Sylvia Beach, who is the woman that opened Shakespeare and Company in Paris, France in the early 1900s. So it follows her, which, by the way, Shakespeare and Company, super famous bookstore. All of the books are in English, so it was like the first American-owned bookstore in France when it opened in the 1900s. And it kind of just like took France by storm. It was a place where a lot of authors went to swap ideas and to brainstorm and to hang out and spend time together. And it's also the bookstore that published Ulysses by James Joyce when no one else would. So technically, the Shakespeare and Company that you see now, that's like on the river across from the Notre Dame, was not Sylvia Beach's Shakespeare and Company. Sylvia Beach closed Shakespeare and Company, the original one, during World War II, and then never reopened it. But a man took over and opened a new Shakespeare and Company, I think because he was really inspired by what Sylvia Beach was able to accomplish. That's what the book is about. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's a perfect book. I think it just came at the perfect time. And what I mean by that is I have been feeling super reading fatigued. Reading is beautiful. It's such a wonderful experience, and I'm so lucky to have reading in my life for so many reasons. But over the last, I'd say 6 months, all of my reading has been numbers-based, and probably even longer than 6 months. But it's all about how many books have I read? Have I read enough? Have I read too much romance? Should I read other genres? Oftentimes at the end of every month, when I only have like a week left, I always think, how many books can I read before the end of the month so I have more to talk about in my wrap-up? A lot of the times I'm calculating how many hours are in an audiobook and how many hours do I need to read each day so that I can hit a certain number of books before the end of the month. So that's just kind of, I think probably many people who create book content, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Goodreads, wherever you talk about books, you probably have felt that sense of pressure of like, I'm not reading popular enough books. I didn't read enough fantasy this month or romance this month or mysteries this month. Like, I just feel like reading has been all about the numbers for me recently. I don't know if any of this is making sense. I just feel like I was really excited about the story and about reading. And so I slowed down a little bit and I just kind of romanticized reading a little bit, and I had a lot of fun. So even though I don't think that this book is perfect, and there's times where the details feel like they kind of get away from you and you're learning about things that you don't really know, like why you're learning about certain things, or there's just, especially towards the middle of the book, it feels a lot like Sylvia is just getting taken advantage of the entire time, and you're kind of waiting for her to be like that strong woman that you know she is. Ultimately, it was the book I needed when I needed it. So I really, really loved this one, and it got me on a kick for historical fiction. So I have picked up All the Good Left Undone. I'm halfway done with that book, and I'll be talking about it in my May wrap-up. But I've also picked up a couple more historical fictions. So if you have any historical fiction recommendations, please let me know. I just want to read historical fiction right now and memoirs. So all of the recommendations I will take. This was a great book for me, and I really enjoyed it. So there we go. Okay, and now let's get into the final 3 books, which were all romances. The first 2 are historical romances. So we have, first off, Destiny's Embrace by Beverly Jenkins. I have had my eye on this book for a really long time, and I was really excited about it. Things I really loved were the main character. The main woman in this book has such a great amount of character development who she is at the beginning is completely different from who she is at the end. And it's a gradual change. I felt like I really believed her growth and I loved what I saw. I thought it was really, really fun. Another thing I loved was the romance feels very tender. It feels like the romance she deserves after such a terrible upbringing. It feels like she's going to be taken care of. It feels like she's safe, and I love that. Again, I'm just really rooting for the main character in this one. And then lastly, I really do like the main guy in this book. And again, it kind of goes into their romance. So I think if you like the two main characters and you like their romance, it's a good romance. The things that I didn't love was, number one, the main character has gone through a lot of trauma at the beginning of her life, like until she's 30. Like for the first 30 years of her life, she is neglected, taken advantage of, verbally and mentally abused. She is just treated awfully. And there's a moment where redemption can come. And yet, although redemption comes, it doesn't feel like the moment all the readers were waiting for. I was really excited to see how it all wrapped up and came together, and this excited, like, just redemption for the main character who I loved so much. And it feels like it kind of fizzles. Like it just, the big moment comes to the forefront and then it all just kind of washes away. And I wish that it was a bigger moment because I think that that's what the main character deserved. And also just the last thing, for a cover like this, I'm expecting the heat, okay? I'm expecting a fever to arise. And instead, you know, the steam was a little bit tell don't show. So we got a lot of fade out moments. We got a lot of allusions to moments we didn't get to read. So they'll be like, oh yeah, it was a long night. And you're just like, tell me more. How late were you up? What happened? Because I'd like to know. So that was just a thing. Because I just feel like it's okay if a romance doesn't have steam in it, but when a cover looks like this and it's a historical romance, you're expecting that heat. And so I just wished there was a little more heat. That's all. So that was Destiny's Embrace. Okay, and then the second historical romance I read was The Devil in Disguise, or A Devil in Disguise. I saw this on a shelf that was like, if you liked this book, you might like this book. And I was like, I'll give this one a shot. Technically, this book is like the 7th in a series, but from the reviews I read before, they said it was a standalone. So like it's a standalone within the series. You don't need to read all of the other books in order to understand them. So I think there were a few moments where other books are referenced that I didn't understand, but I don't think it impeded my understanding of the book. I think I was able to follow along perfectly fine. I just missed out on some like inside jokes that probably would have been more fulfilling if I read the other 6. Ultimately, my problem with this one is when I'm reading a romance, and I feel like many romance readers might feel the same way, you basically want the romance to be the main plot point and then like one hardship, one thing that really pulls them apart or really creates chaos within the book. And in this book, it felt like there were 6 different major things that were happening in a way that made it a little oversaturated with problems, right? So we like have this main girl whose husband has died. So that's one big problem that they have to overcome because she's like a widow who's like really well off and owns this company, but like society doesn't want her to find someone else. And so you kind of have that problem. You have a little bit of memory loss. You have attempted murder. You have a found father. You have a complicated family history. You have plotted murder. You have explosions. Like it just, to me, got to a point where I was like, there's too much happening here. And I've now lost sight of the romance that I want to be focused on. It's not that those things couldn't be interesting. It's that there was just so many difficulties that you're just less attached to the romance because you're like, okay, well, I have like 5 crimes I need to solve. So I don't really know what's happening with the love story anymore. So that was my problem with this book, is just because it was so complicated with other issues, even by the end, it felt like there were maybe 3 false endings where like you kind of thought the book was done and then there was something that you forgot, didn't get tied up, and you're like, okay, I guess there's something else to unpack here. I guess, let's see. For me, I was in it for the romance, and I feel like there was a lot of distraction from that. So that was that. And then the final sort of romance I read this month, but also kind of magical fantasy I read this month, was Once Upon a Broken Heart. I bought this in Paris in March, and so many of you said how much you loved this book. And this isn't really a disappointment, it just wasn't my favorite, so I'll explain in a second. But basically this is about a woman who has fallen in love with a man who is destined to marry someone else. They have decided to move forward with marrying the main character's stepsister, and so the main character begs the Prince of Hearts, who is a fate, to stop the marriage from happening. She's like, please stop this marriage, I'll do whatever it takes. And because he's a fate and a little bit of a trickster, he's like, okay, I'll stop this wedding, but you have to promise me 3 kisses whenever I ask for them. And he doesn't say who the kisses are for. He doesn't say when they'll happen. It doesn't matter what she's doing or what problem she's in. For the rest of her life, she knows she has 3 kisses to satisfy to this fate. And so the concept, very interesting. I liked the drama of it. I liked the magical world building. It felt very beautiful at times. It felt a little bit like the Night Circus in the way that you kind of get lost in the descriptions of how beautiful this world is. And so I really enjoyed that. I really liked the Prince of Hearts because he is kind of scheming, but then you can tell he is maybe a little interested in our main character, but like he shouldn't be for many reasons. And so you kind of see this tension between the two of them and all of that kind of stuff. So again, this one really isn't a disappointment. It just wasn't my favorite. I think mainly because it reads more like a young adult, and I don't really read YA ever. And so I think I would have really loved this when I was in high school, and I would have been like, oh my God, adventure and love. But I think that the main character kind of has Disney princess syndrome of like extreme naive, you know? So like everyone in the book and the reader reading the book is like, hey, you shouldn't do that thing. But then the main character's like, but I must because it's right. And we're all sitting there like, bitch, you could die. And she's like, but I must because it's right. And you're like, please stop. And she's like, but I must because it's right. You know what I mean? So there was just a few moments like that where I was like, dude, no, like you're falling in love too fast. You're falling out of love too fast. You're too trusting. You're too forgiving. Like you are living in a dangerous world. Please act like you are. Like, why are you so naive about these things? Like obviously her being naive produces more storyline and creates chaos, but I'm just like, dude, come on. Like, everyone around you knows that's a bad decision. Why are you doing it? So anyway, that was Once Upon a Broken Heart. It is part of a series, so I'm excited to read the rest of it, or I don't know if it's a series or if there's just going to be a sequel, but I'm interested to see how the Prince of Hearts plays into the story moving forward, because he's not really there in the end, so. But you know he's going to return, so. Anyway, that is Once Upon a Broken Heart, and those are the books of April, my friends. Again, let me know what your favorite book of the month was. Let me know if you have any historical fiction recommendations, and just let me know how you're feeling about reading. So there we have it. I hope you liked this video. I hope you had fun, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!